Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you're listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 599. My name is Eric Nelson, and with me today, I have my regular co-host, Matt Lungus. Today is Wednesday, April 6th, 2022. Matt, how you doing today?
Eric, I am well. I hear that we have some potential VMworld announcements coming here in short order. We have one of our favorite guests to talk about our all things security wrap-up in and around Log4j with Mr. Bob Plankers. But before we get to all of that, sir, how are you? What is the color of the bay out there? And what's the weather out there on the West Coast?
Well, Matt, let me tell you, I thought you were going to do the news steal, but you missed it, so I get to throw it in there. What do you think about Elon Musk owning 10% of Twitter?
Now being on the board, 9.7%, and with what, $3 billion investment? Well, the edit button may appear in our lives. So all of those mistweets that are out there, who the heck knows what that will be? I read an interesting technical take on an editing of a tweet is what happens if it is retweeted, and then the implications for that. So you could have, if you were a person with a couple of million followers, or you're a government agency, and you disparage information that's out there, and then it gets retweeted, and then you make an edit to that, then what's the effect, right? There is something to say once something has been put public, and that permanency of the record. It's kind of the DNA of what is Twitter.
That's the DNA of all content you share on the web. I mean, you hear bad stories of that, where things that get shared that no one had permission to share, it's almost impossible to take it down. But having an edit, that we can do, because I know that on occasion we'll tweet something corporate wise that we didn't have rights to, or somebody took offense to, and then we have to take it down, and we have to go search through all the retweets and send the Twitter owners that retweeted please could you help us take this down, and we try to long finger all through the hierarchical trees to see if we can pull back as much as we can. So when we go get sued, which we have been sued for using things we shouldn't have, at least we can show the plaintiff and settle out of court saying we've done the very best we can to remove as much as we can of the tree hierarchy of these things. So I really like it. The other thing I like about Elon owning is I think Elon's an innovator, a very fast innovator, and I feel like Twitter has been not as innovative as they could be. So I'm excited about seeing that happen. But yeah, there you go. Weather in the Bay Area is beautiful. It is 70. It is springtime. Put the garden in, the bees. I cut my bees in half, installed new bees. Everything is beautiful. Springtime, fun weather in California right now because it hasn't dried out yet. So everything's wet and green, and grass is still growing. It hasn't turned brown. So pretty nice here. The color of the bay is a nice turquoise green because the sun is out. It's not very windy, no chop, no mud stirring up. So just beautiful California weather. Can't go wrong with that. Before we get to Bob Plankers, let's do a drive-by to Corey Romero and see if there's anything new with the vExpert program and how the world up in the mountains is.
Hey, Eric. Hey, Matt. Weather in Utah is fantastic. It did snow yesterday, and it's sunny again today and a little bit warmer. vExperts, yeah. So there's not a ton happening right now with vExpert. We just got done last week with wrapping up announcements for all 10 subprograms. We are in the process of going through the appeals with the subprogram managers and making decisions on those appeals. We did a rebrand, or kind of like a new look and feel, not a rebrand, new look and feel of the vExpert website. You'll know it looks more like our corporate site now. We do have, for those of you that do know and don't know Martin Smith has been the one who's built 99% of the vExpert website. He's done a fantastic job. Martin has decided to help out a little bit more, and he's actually going to do a lot of updates for us the next couple of months. So we've got some really cool, exciting things happening and coming. Martin and I have gone over a list of things that needed to be done on the website, bug fixes or enhancements, and we've got a list of about 15 things that Martin's working through. So I'm really excited about that. One little thing on VMworld. I know it's a little bit early, but we're talking about VMworld. There will be vExpert parties in both US and Europe. I'm very, very looking forward and I'm excited to seeing everybody in person. Everybody that knows me that works at VMware, that's worked with me, that's my biggest thing, is to actually say hi, see you in person, give you a handshake, give you a hug, and get to meet the people in person that I speak with on a daily basis. I am really looking forward and excited about that.
All right. Thanks a lot, Corey. I know that transition to my news for VMworld, which, it's going on August 29th through September 1st. And also in Europe, you've got November 7th through the 10th. We will be there as we've committed. I think, Corey, the group, we talked and, we were debating on, do we do like a third in, half in, all in? Where are we from the standpoint of, showing up and being completely, there? And, there is also how many people are going to show up, but we've decided, Corey and myself and the community team as a group have decided that we're so desperate to see everybody that we're going to go all in. We're going to spend every last cent they've given me for this year's budget. We're going to create both code VMware theaters. We're going to have a blockchain there. We're going to be giving away code. We're just going to go all in. So if you remember a couple of years ago where we had the coffee bar and we just spent everything we had, and I borrowed money from next year. I think I went to a bank, got a loan, on next year's budget, and we're going to do that again. So if you're thinking about coming to VMworld or you want to come to VMworld, you can get a community session. Go to vBrownBag and sign up for a community session. Tell your boss you're doing a session at VMworld. We're all going to be there. We're going to be all in. We're going to have fun. I got to say, we're going to have fun. We're going to do both vExpert parties. We're going to give away a cool vExpert gift of some kind or another. We're going to have fun AI programming events. Like, we're probably going to go more all in than we should, but we're just like, you know what? This is the time to explore possibilities. And so we're going to be there. And I know there's going to be some announcements coming up later today for employees. And tomorrow we're going to make a big splash about it. And so I think you're going to be excited about everything that happens. And I would encourage everybody to start thinking about masking up, getting your second vaccine booster, whatever you need to do to get your tickets to come. And if you need a place to stay, let me know. I can put a tent out in my backyard in Palo Alto and you can commute up with me. And with that, we'll say hello to Bob Plankers. Bob is a senior technical marketing architect, CPBU. We're here to talk about Log4j. Bob, I know you've been on, the last time you came on was last September, and you talked about security issues and your sessions at VMworld. So why don't you do the 2-3 minute introduction? How long you been at VMware? What do you do? And then we'll get into the topic of Log4j.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate being on. I'm Bob Plankers. I'm a staff technical marketing architect. I'm in the formerly the CPBU, the Cloud Platform Business Unit. Now we're the Cloud Infrastructure Business Group, CIBG. To outsiders, that means almost nothing. But it really, I'm focused on. I've moved since the last time we talked. I moved to the VMware Cloud on AWS team. I'm still doing a lot of infrastructure and vSphere security things, and that that's just part of my DNA. But it's interesting and looking at the cloud.
When you moved onto a new role, are you still in CPBU, Cloud Business Unit, but now you're just
CIBG is the follow-on to CPBU, and so we're all one big happy family. There's still some of the individual groups regarding the on-premises stuff versus VMware Cloud and that, but I sort of straddle all of it right now. Really starting to look at a lot of the VMware Cloud on AWS solves a lot of security problems, because it's an implementation, right? It's an actual instance of vSphere out in the cloud. And so a lot of what people have to worry about on premises, they don't have to worry about it out in the cloud, or the worries are different. And so, that's my job is different there, but I'm trying to take a lot of what I've been doing, and also how do you get people comfortable with the cloud? I'm an old infrastructure guy, and I've been doing virtualization infrastructure for 20 years, 17 years, something like that. And so how I think about things, I like to think is similar to the way a lot of our customers think about things. And so getting me to translate my stuff, my thought processes into cloud and cloud ways of doing business, is really an interesting thing. It is interesting.
I'll add just kind of a side note here in that we've been talking to Satya Jena. He's a VP of SaaS transformation at VMware. We're going to book him on the podcast so he can come in. And he's doing some presentations internally to us, so we have to tweak what we can say but his job is to transition VMware from this package delivery product company, right, to a SaaS. And he has kind of like a roadmap of how many years it's going to take. And what we do now is we go, and our SaaS is kind of like the last thing we talk about, right? We go to a customer and we go, here's our on-prem products, here's what they do, and if you don't want any of that, maybe you'll twist our arm into talking to you about kind of the SaaS options. But then he has kind of a roadmap of when that will flip until I can't talk about when or what, but it's like when all of a sudden we only have SaaS, right? Like now we'll probably never get there, right? Or maybe that's a 20-year roadmap, but there is that idea that VMware is in this transitional period where we're going to start leading with VMC on AWS. We're going to have ESX on in clouds all over the place, and it will become the way we at least talk about it to begin with, and maybe one day even be what we just have to offer, right? So it's an interesting transition.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and the on-premises stuff is in no danger of going away.
No, right? No,
but because there's so much of it out there, and that's what allows for the choice that people have, But just the idea that you don't, for a lot of businesses, especially with staffing issues, and that you can offload a lot of that stuff. Get rid of that. Why even worry about it? Just have somebody else do it. The cloud is like outsourcing in many ways. And
myself and Tommy Berry, who runs all the social channels, we've been thinking about how to present SaaS and just teach our IT practitioners that we do have SaaS offerings, right? Because a lot of our guys don't even know that we really do have SaaS. We're like, we have some fairly technical ways to go about presenting Twitter cards that show our SaaS offerings, but we were trying to think about how it would be a fun way too. And we found pictures of guys asleep with coffee cups where they had to wake up at 3 a.m. because their phone went off, and we thought it'd be funny to have an iPhone that an IT guy would have set for a baby crying. So 2 a.m. when a server goes down, a baby starts crying, and the wife rolls over and says, "It's your turn," right? And then the VMware SaaS solutions get a good night's sleep, right? Because
absolutely, and Log4j, some of this other stuff, the Spring for Shell stuff that came out this week, that had pretty limited scope for infrastructure products, but a lot of this stuff, it's just fixed. It just gets fixed quietly on the back end. You don't have to worry about it when it comes out. The problem is already solved and been solved for months in many cases. And so, it's the analogy to babies crying in the middle of the night is absolutely accurate. So.
Do you want to be making your own electricity, or do you just want to simply plug into the outlet and do your bidding as any other utility, right?
Yeah,
do you want to have to make that generator and know about motor windings and everything else that you have to do? You just want to consume the service and have it as a reliable utility.
Yep, and there will always be the options to do all of it, and that's actually one of the greatest things about it is that vSphere is underneath all of it, and and so there's whatever. If you want to do it yourself, fine, but if you don't, or that's not really working out for you, we've got options for that as well. And so, one other thing that I thought of while you were talking was that it'll be good. The SaaS offerings are going to be good for on-premises deployments as well. The idea that we flip around, we actually use the SaaS offerings. We deploy new things first there, give them a shot, try them out, and so that the on-premises stuff it's not a new release. Let's put it that way. When it ships for on-premises customers, and that it's not, the code has been being used for a while. And that's a really important thing.
I feel like that happens to me a lot as I'm using enterprise SaaS products now. I feel like I'm a guinea pig about half the time.
Yeah, flip the guinea pigness around from
On-prem,
and the
SaaS.
truth is, all software, we don't use our software like customers use software. It's just, everyone's doing something different, and it's just a reality of the software industry. And so, trying to control it a little bit more is something that we can do if we use our SaaS offerings to do it.
Yeah.
So, Bob, let's switch gears over to Log4j. And I want to take the listeners back to the beginning of December. I think it was the first full week. We're around December 9th. I can actually remember being over at a year-end event over in Pittsburgh for VMware, where there was some ramblings so that this had been released. So how did you first hear about this? And what was your impression of it? And when did it start to build into where you knew where it was going to be the thing that it is, or this event that now we have defined as what was this nuclear bomb within the IT industry? So how did you get read into it, sir? And as soon as you heard it, did you know it was going to be what it was, or was it?
Yeah,
did it take a little bit of time?
Yeah. Well, and the thing about Log4j, we've had incidents like this before. It's escaping me now. They all have cutesy names. Heartbleed, the SSL vulnerabilities and stuff like that. Luckily, they don't happen on this scale very often, but they probably happen too infrequently that we kind of forget how to deal with them. Incident response takes practice too. But to your point, I think it was December. It was the Friday before. It was like Friday, December 4th or something like that.
I think it was the 10th. It got released on the 9th, but then it got pushed out on the 10th, where it really got public.
Yeah,
it was that first full, right in the Christmas season for us here in North America and around the globe of just where things are starting to wind down, right? The change windows have started to really lock in, which also will play into this, I'm sure, as we get into the discussion.
Yeah, I'm really glad it didn't happen later, because we would have run really far into the holiday seasons and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. The 10th, that Friday, I think it was like something like 4 a.m. Pacific time. All the news broke that there was a problem. Log4j is a Java logging library. Logging is really important as a security person, and auditing, even debugging and things like that. You want to know what's happening in your systems. And so, the people that invented Log4j really scratched an itch, and they have this thing out there, and somebody found a flaw in it. Actually, the flaw was found years ago and was actually presented at the Black Hat conference, or one of the Black Hats or DEF CONs or something like that. And it was largely ignored, which was interesting. And then it resurfaced. Somebody found the presentation, or maybe the original authors decided that, this was whatever. But some folks from Alibaba actually released it and made the world aware of this thing. And because Log4j is just so ubiquitous, it's like I said, it's really scratches an itch. And that itch is present in a lot of stuff, including a lot of VMware products, a lot of other products out there. We were definitely not alone, but anywhere there's Java, there might be Log4j. And so, Oracle advertises that it's billions of devices, and we all just went, oh no, And so, and then on I think it was the 14th, the next Tuesday, so that advisory came out, and there was really no way to tell everyone had to learn about this all at the same time. There was really no way to tell people privately, tell vendors privately. And that's usually what happens, is when a security researcher finds something like a flaw in a VMware product or something that they suspect is an issue, they will reach out to us, or
if they're going the white hat routine, right?
Sure. Yeah, they'll reach out to our security@vmware.com, and they'll say, hey, I found something. I want to work with you on it. We've got a bug bounty program. We'll pay people for their work on this, that sort of stuff. So we work with them. They tell us about it. We go, oh yeah, you're right. We figure it out. And then there's usually it's called responsible disclosure or coordinated disclosure. There's a couple of different terms for it. Coordinated is what people like to say, where we're we get 90 to 120 days or so, depends on the researchers. The researchers want to take credit for their work. They want to publish their findings and all that stuff. We don't want them to publish that stuff, and all of our customers don't want them to publish that stuff
until it's remediated.
And so all of a sudden, and so that's the normal thing. We get 90 days. We can work this into our product development cycles. It's not chaos. We can make sure it's all tested correctly and get all the versions figured out and all of that stuff. And this all goes on behind the scenes so that when a VMware security advisory comes out, it's cut and dried. Here's the problem. Here's what products have the problem. Here's what the fix is. Sometimes we've got a workaround. If you can't apply the patch right now, try the workaround, that sort of thing. On December 10th, we were all learning at the same time. And so people coming into work that morning were like, discovering this thing. And it's like, oh no, and everyone's starting from the same spot. Customers, VMware, there's not a 90-day lead time, and we all get to see how the sausage is made. And then on the 14th, the next Tuesday, Apache Software Foundation disclosed more stuff. In fact, their original guidance, they revised their guidance that they put out on the 10th, and things got a lot more serious. There was another vulnerability that was disclosed on the 14th, and so we kind of had to start over. So all the work that we did over the weekend and all that stuff, punch the reset button, and we start again. Luckily, we didn't have to find people. Everyone was all spun up for it at that point, but from a customer perspective, and that's where we kind of got into situations where people thought they were remediated, especially the Workspace ONE folks. Some of our products are designed to hang out on the internet, and when your logging library, the thing that logs connections and that, is vulnerable to stuff that the internet throws at us.
Some out of our Horizon customers, sure.
Yeah,
Right.
And so, and then a bunch of them, they patched right away on the 10th, or fixed it on the 10th, did the workaround, whatever, and they said, okay, we're good. And then they left. They went away. Hey, the holidays are coming up. I'm going to go do my Christmas shopping, that sort of thing. And they didn't catch on the 14th that everything changed again. And so that's something that we really internalized. We got to find ways to get it in front of people. And that's why, even today, there's been security advisories today about some stuff, and we're really adamant now, blog posts, go out on Twitter, all this stuff. We're not trying to hide our security vulnerabilities. We're really trying to get it, they happen, and we'd like the defenders to have the same knowledge as the attackers at this point. But over the course of the next couple of weeks there, then because we started from scratch, we got to get the stuff into the product development cycles.
And just for listeners that may have, let's just say they're outside of the security realm or whatnot, or just didn't happen to hear about this. This wasn't a minor little, anomaly, right? This was a major impact as far as what the vulnerability could be exploited and what you were able to have then access to within systems, right? And then the CVSS score was absolutely through the roof.
Yep. It's
what this was.
Yeah, CVSS is 0 to 10 on the first scale, and this was a 10. It was a full remote compromise. You could ask. So it turns out the logging library, Log4j, if you asked it to log specific strings, it would actually interpret those strings as things to do, like reach out to an LDAP server and retrieve data. And neat thing about Java is very helpful. You can ask it to you'd ask Log4j to go out and retrieve an object from an LDAP server, a malicious one, and then it would bring back that object could be a Java class. And Java, being helpful, would load the Java class. Thanks very much. And the Java class in your malicious class could be like, hey, write things, open up a shell, connect. You've got full.
You're off to the races at that point.
Yeah, it's nasty. And so, it was not good. And so, there were a total of 4 different CVEs, the vulnerabilities that were found in these. The first 2 were really serious. And so, the Log4j version that came out. I think the last version, I don't know what it's at right now, but the version after
2.17.1 maybe is
2.17.1 was the last one after all the fourth CVE. But basically, if you're running 2.16 and you don't have a vulnerable configuration, you're set. And so some of our products had 2.16. We released that. Some of them were able to come up to 2.17 and 2.17.1. Over time, it'll all go to 2.17.1, but we want to make sure that it's tested. We want to close the hole first, make sure everyone's safe, and then we'll update to the latest thing. But we're running into a lot of people now that are doing vulnerability scans, and they just look at file library versions. So it says, hey, that's 2.16. And it says it's vulnerable, well, it is. The context is really important in security,
right?
Just because something says it's not a critical vulnerability doesn't mean that in your environment, there's a lot of stuff depending on your environment. And so,
right. So security could come back and say, you must have, per our, SecOps policy 217, sure. Right? It's not affected with the version that it is. It isn't vulnerable, but we must adhere to security policy, which is where you see special versions that we released that had that 217 version in it prior to the next iteration, that special patch release that we did for certain products. I can think of the connection server on Horizon being one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And so, we're working our way towards that. And as patches get released and updates are made to products, they will have the new stuff in them. That's true of all the open source software that we use. Unless it's a critical vulnerability, and a critical vulnerability that is outward facing. A lot of our stuff is deployed as appliances, and appliances are really the VM itself around the appliance is really the support boundary. There's not a lot we want people doing inside there. In fact, most of the time, if you log into an appliance like that, you already have privileged access to a lot of stuff. And so, you don't need a remote compromise if you can just log in as root, that sort of thing. But, making sure that we can close that vulnerability, get the updates, any updates that need to happen into the products. And then, like I said earlier, make sure that it's tested, make sure that everything works. Because that was one of the other things that we started running into. We didn't really have a good way initially of handling all of the different workarounds. All we had was workarounds to start with, and how do we do that? We ended up using knowledge base articles for that. And, there are a lot of different standards when you've got 40 different products that are affected. And teams working independently on them. There's, and with the urgency, we don't have time to go back and edit and, pass it through an editorial process and things like that. And so, but customers in general were really helpful. We get a lot of feedback from people. Hey, this is working. Hey, this isn't working. Hey, you've got an error in your script. Hey, that sort of thing. And so a lot of support call volume, a lot of chaos. And so, one of the other things that we do with critical vulnerabilities is when we put one out, like today, for example, there's a Q&A, a frequently asked questions list that goes with it. And for Log4j, that was just enormous. And, as people were asking questions and things, we just tried to write it down. We tried to have regular updates. That's not something we usually have to do with a security advisory, but somebody had suggested it. Hey, it'd be great if we knew when you were going to update this. And so I ended up having a twice a day schedule, like at 10 a.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Pacific or something like that. I would post.
One of the things that at least from the TAM side to see into the BU and see how that we handled this as an when I say we as an organization, as VMware handled this, was the collaboration of all the forces to get this done. It was intense. I can think about just seeing it visually in some of our internal Slack channels, and the amount of time that people like yourself, Mike Foley, that were on there that just absolutely went to town with the amount of information and answering questions and coming back and then this was a moving target, right? As we had talked about through that weekend, where we thought, well, okay, here's where we need to be, and then the Apache Foundation comes back out and says, this is a little worse than what we had initially thought.
New information
start all over again.
And so, hey, I don't blame them at all, and this is not me throwing Apache under the bus. They provide so many fundamental services and software to the world, like it's software. There's going to be problems like this. We're going to run into something like this in a few years. Something like this will happen again, that sort of thing. And we just,
I have a relevant question on this, right? Like you mentioned the scale. I forget the name of you call it 1 through 10. What's the name of that?
CVSS score,
CVSS,
Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS.
So does the scoring system? It seems like there was a flaw for me as an end user of SaaS products, and as a business owner consuming SaaS products. We got roped in through all the holiday season. For us, we had to contact every single vendor and get written authorization that they had addressed the SaaS, the Log4j vulnerability in their products, and like literally did fire drill with 20 different services just because we're dependent on so many things to run communities and to run social programs and to run social monitoring programs and everything that we run in the digital marketing area, right? Website.com, all that. So we spent our holiday season, and I wanted to raise my hand and go, has anybody actually seen this? Are we under attack? Like, I get it. I have to spend where are we under attack? Were there things getting hacked into and using this vulnerability? And there was never any publicly statements around this was real, or is this like a Apache or
this was real, man. This from almost the beginning. There were attempts. The VMware Cloud folks, we've got a wonderful team of SREs that maintain the VMware Cloud on AWS, for example. And from the moment this was released, they started noticing traffic on this, and they took steps immediately to lock things down, to make sure.
That's an important point to talk about, right, Bob? That there was actually, we call it an emergency services outage for some of our SaaS tenants, depending on what the flavor of SaaS service that you were consuming. Where we did not
took steps to fix it
because it was so severe. That we acted in sort of, let's say,
we're going to
ask forgiveness, right?
Yes, exactly. This is a forgiveness, not a permission situation, and I think most, I would doubt that anybody had real problems with that. Usually it's just a communications problem, but this was a serious situation. And we needed customers to know that as well. And that was the big thing.
I think there for me, maybe I just don't know this leveling system well enough, where there was never any communication that anybody had active hacks where people were doing destruction. I was vulnerable to ransomware because we saw 15 people coming in from these countries, attacking and moving data around, or actually getting into systems and intentionally creating havoc. Right?
There's a flip side to that too, right?
Right? Like
it might have happened, but the company that it happened to, they might not want to make that public.
Right.
That's that's a big thing too. But and Eric, your point is valid. The in like the frequently asked questions list, all of them, we always put in there whether this is being exploited in the wild. The vulnerability announcements today, for example, I think it's like question 5 or something. Is this being exploited in the wild, out on the internet? And the stuff from today, when we had first published it, we hadn't seen anything yet, and even the Spring for Shell stuff from earlier this week or last week or whatever, we hit, that's really low. We're not seeing, there's not a lot of traffic on that. Log4j was almost instant, people were abusing it. Yeah. And so it was in there, but I think we could do a better job of how do we impress upon a person like you that something's really important without seeming marketing-esque, sort of like, oh my goodness, the sky is falling, because sometimes the sky is falling, and that's why I really on a personal level, I really try not to blow smoke up people's because security is hard enough, and when I say something's really important, I really want people to understand that, it's really important, or, because some vulnerabilities, well, especially tech journalism and stuff like that. Like some of the Spectre, there was
Yeah, we need a vocabulary that just differentiates between vulnerability and under attack, right? Because
and you're in trouble, like and
we're being attacked. And then I'd be like, okay, Christmas is off the table. We have to, now we did it because somebody yelled at us loud enough that we just kept, but I would say that we didn't do it as quickly as we could have. We took like 2 weeks over the holiday. Yeah. If this vendor didn't get back to us, I'd be like, well, it's Christmas. Like, because there was it was a vulnerability. Yes, it's a serious vulnerability, but we never got any knowledge in the communication inside of VMware to us that we were under attack, right? Or that this was, now I get it, to Matt, your point. You don't want people to know that you're under attack and that grenades are going off and that, we could have serious, because you just don't want to give other people knowledge.
And if you're publicly traded, that could do a lot of things as far as not only valuations, and I'm speaking not only just as VMware, but any publicly traded organization as far as stock price and then reporting obligations and all of that other things.
Right.
So,
well, as it turns out, we did what we had to do. We did work through Christmas. We did find got letters from everybody, found out where all the SaaS vendors were with their implementations, and managed to completion all of our tools that we relied on to do that. So that is interesting. And I can only imagine how that goes inside for our products. Mine is easy. I'm whining about something that's probably a lot easier than trying to go deal with, vulnerabilities in products that have to get patches and installed and everything.
Yeah. Well, and then workarounds too. Workarounds are kind of the bane of our existence, because workarounds are this manual, go into the product, into an area we really don't want you in, like, because you shouldn't have to be here, and tweak some stuff that we, and follow some instructions. And, we're giving people, how do you use a Unix editor like VI if you're a Windows admin? Like, I've been doing Linux and Unix stuff for 30 years, and VI is still annoying to me, and it's just like explaining it to Windows admins and that. And then how do we, on a product level, make sure that whatever we don't want you, when we issue a patch and a customer applies it, we want a whole
new level of testing, right, Bob?
Roll forward. Well, that's the whole thing.
New level of testing.
And we need to get all of our developers on the same page about expectations. We need to make sure that it's tested. The files that we asked people to edit as part of a workaround need to get overwritten, and everything needs to be right at the end of that. And it takes some testing. We've got a lot of interoperability stuff. And then that's just within VMware, and then think about our partners, the HPEs and Dell EMCs and all of that sort of stuff, and the bundled stuff like in a VX rail, all of that stuff's built on this stuff. So, it's really important to get the foundation right so that all the other stuff can follow. And it's complicated. And that's why normally we have 90 to 120 days to figure this out, and and it took that to get some of these patches out here. People were asking us for patches. Hey, when is the patch going to be out? Hey, when is the patch going to be out? And it's like, you wait for it, do the workaround, and please give us a minute here, mid-January, late January, that sort of thing. And so,
well, I'll tell you this, I don't feel as salty as I did during the Christmas, because, I only have so many Christmases left in my lifetime, right? To burn one,
yeah, I know.
You don't get those back. You don't get them back, right? You just don't, right? Like, but I'm glad that it was as serious as it was, because, these things happen. You're going to give away a couple of these to go, deal with these kind of things. This is the nature of being in tech and IT, and we certainly get paid for it, right? Like our salaries are high because it is technical and is hard, and sometimes it's really hard. So
and sometimes I'm sitting at my in-laws' kitchen table, updating a frequently asked questions list about, some Java component, but I don't know. Out of these things, you look at what helped.
Yeah, Bob, what did we learn from this? For such a big blast radius, what did we learn as a community?
We learned a bunch of process stuff, but as a community, what helped customers. So not only did we learn about like the responsible disclosure and coordinated disclosure stuff, how these things actually work, that was kind of a new thing for a lot of folks. we learned that all of the years, there's various sets of guidance out there, security guidance. The Center for Internet Security, for example, has got a nice top 18 list of security controls and things you should do to help your security in your organization. And the first two things are asset inventories. What do you have? What do you have for software? What do you have for hardware? And
Right.
it's not, there's a reason that they're number one and number two. Like people really learned out of this whole thing that if you don't know what you have, you can't check it to see if it's patched or if it's vulnerable or any of that stuff. And so
If it's
Yeah, that
backed
was-
up, if there's configs out there for it, what
That-
happens? Right.
You hit it on the head, because that's what we spent the first 2 days doing. It's like,
Yeah.
we got lists, but they've been lists that we've generated over 7 years. Nobody's
yeah,
updated
and they're all
them.
kind of
So
decrepit.
we're trying to figure out which ones are still valid, which ones aren't, which ones are we
Mhm.
still using.
I bet you have a
But
really good
just
list
using-
right now. Yeah. So yeah, that's one big thing. So a lot of organizations figured out that, hey, we need to track this stuff, a wiki page, whatever. So Eric, you've got probably a good list now of all the stuff.
Yes,
that
we do.
keep it
Yeah.
up to date.
Yeah.
Second thing, what was I going to say? Second thing was the ability to run things on systems, like ad hoc commands on systems, and whether it's just a script that just has a for loop and SSHs into different systems to look for stuff, or if you've got a more formal thing, the salt stacks and configuration management tools of the world, and that where you can ask them to go look for log4j.jar and run a command on it, maybe an OpenSSL command to get a hash of that file back. And the ability to run a command like that and then get the information back, especially in bigger environments, was really crucial. Organizations that could do that could just schedule a job to just look to search through an entire file system on a server, look for the right files, hash them, and get that data back. And then they had it all, and that was really important. The other
It's interesting. The other thing we need to do is to make a map of API calls, because we had external services that we gave API keys to, right? That then can get into internal services. And you're like trying to make a map of how many, we don't use that service anymore, but they still have an API key that can get into and invoke these other services that then, we got to worry about with somebody getting in Log4j on their service that has an API call that they could then write some code and call into our services, and away you go. Right?
Yeah. I mean, that was the whole SolarWinds thing back in the day, a couple of years ago now, that, trust between systems and trust between stuff that maybe isn't appropriate anymore, or maybe wasn't thought out well to start with. How do you audit for that? How do you get rid of it? That sort of thing. So,
and as a business owner, we're just thrilled that something worked, and then we start using it. And that's as far as we go. Like, yay, it works and it's doing. We can move on.
I routinely say the biggest lie sysadmins tell themselves is that I'll come back to this later and fix it.
Right.
Like, no, you won't. Don't even lie to yourself. Where I used to work, like, we just finally got over it. Like, if I don't do it now, and we tell people, if I don't do it right now, it's never going to get fixed. And
you're making me want to cry, because you're pulling me back to December, where I look at this and I go, oh, if we'd just done this better, I would have gotten my Christmas back, because it's like we just hit every single one of these traps, right? As we went through.
Well, and it's because we're humans and we've got other stuff to do, and there's a burning burning fire that we need to put out, or this like thing that kind of looks strategic but will bite us in the duff at some unknown time in the future, or maybe never. We put out the burning fire, and really we should do the strategic thing instead. But I don't know. And
I pull this back also, and then I'll let you guys continue on here.
But
I pull it back to like a few years ago. This was like 5 or 7 years ago, when back in the days, you've been here a long time, Bob, we didn't take security that seriously. VMware, we didn't even have security in the 2008, 2009. We were like, what? And then somewhere around 2012 or 13, we got hacked internally, where somebody was coming in stealing VMware source code, right? And I don't want to mention any nations, but it did happen. And the truth is, this stuff has ramifications for your business, whether it be ransomware or whether it just be theft of IP or theft of your whole entire operating system. It does come back to really kill businesses if you're not careful.
Yeah. Yep. And it's keeping track of this stuff. Keeping security is not something that you can just hope that happens well, or you can just kind of do on the margins anymore. And and it's always a trade-off. You were saying that there wasn't a whole lot of security Yeah, it's because you move faster when there's not. Security is a drag. It's all overhead for a business, and and it seems odd for a security guy to say that, but I did this as a customer, and security did not move my organization forward. It does keep it from sliding backwards really quick sometimes,
right.
but it's more like an insurance policy. But and this is something that weighs on our mind as we think about products and features and that. Like, what do we do to vSphere to help security, but not make it harder on a vSphere admin? That's a real question that we ask on a routine basis. And how do we design a feature so that somebody can just turn it on and it's right when they turn it on and it's easy to use, and then they can go on with their life?
So Matt, you mentioned like, where are we? Like, and Bob, you'd said like, well, releases of product, there's workarounds, people do the workarounds, get the system. We're now releasing versions that have this baked in, right? And people are in that transition. How long do you think the Log4j arc is going to take before everybody is happy with where they at and we've moved on?
I think most of we're out of crisis mode now. We have been. I think people really came to terms with it. There were some stragglers, especially the folks that I mentioned that did the first remediations, the first workarounds and that, and then thought they were done. They washed their hands and went, hey, I'm going to go celebrate Christmas, or whatever. And those are the people that we needed to get in touch with. And that, and so and I think we're past that crisis mode. It's just kind of mop up mode. We still see a few questions about the vulnerability scanners. Vulnerability scanners, as I mentioned, context is everything when it comes to security vulnerabilities, and security scanners have no context whatsoever. They're just a dumb script that, maybe not so dumb, but it's an automated thing. They're just looking for file versions or whatever. They don't know if it's in use or what the context is. So there's still some of that out there. But like you said, as we go here, and as the 2.17.1, the fixed versions get baked in as part of the normal processes here, a lot of that stuff goes away. And as we see new releases of software, often sometimes to fix other bugs, and people will start picking those up, and it'll be fine. But
Matt,
the idea too of defense in depth. Just one thought. The idea of defense in depth, though, too. Like in the future, if something like this happens, what other security controls are around something to protect it? Firewalls, authentication. In this case, authentication didn't really help. Firewalling, that sort of stuff. What can companies do? What can VMware do? What can our customers do to help give them options when something like this crops up again? So I'm sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to give Matt, as we come up, we have, I think, about 8 more minutes, give or take, depending on how long we're going here. Any thoughts, Matt? Any questions you have with regard to Bob and security?
Well, I to your original point, Eric, of where is the blast radius of this, and is it's have we been able to contain it? I think about the mom and pop businesses. I think about the SMBs of the world. I think about embedded systems.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's very difficult to patch, where they don't even necessarily know where it's running on some type of Java backend. I think from the manufacturing aspect, CNC controllers, things like that, where you don't necessarily think about what the impact of this or where was Java running, but it's so ubiquitous that there's a good chance that it's out there. So I think it's still, is it where it was? No, by no means. We've done a tremendous, as an industry to start to address this, but I think it will still have a long, slow burn as we start to pick up these little other things. And you might see, as we've seen with a lot of other vulnerabilities that have come out, where you'll see a concatenation where it will be the exploit will be taking advantage of, and then some additional payload or other vulnerability tagged in with this.
Yeah, exploit chaining. Yeah, they chain all these things together. Attackers, they'll use whatever is available to them. And so, But you're absolutely right. The long tail of patching's always been a problem. And I take some grief. I get some grief from time to time about my insistence that patching is just something we need to get better at, because it's how you remove these vulnerabilities in that. But it's not the complete answer for large enterprises and enterprises and that. But even just knowing that there's an issue, I had a home router, for example, to your point. So
is this were we at the point, to switch to the marketing gear for a second, is this one of those events that if you're, a CISO or you're a CIO at a large enterprise organization, if you hadn't been there already, if you were on the fence as far as where security fit into the overall place within the IT org, or as a complementary thing as far as next gen AV inspection, or we're just to take that as a whole entire aside and go, I don't want to have to worry about this as part of my capital overhead. And this is going to be yet another thing when I go for budgetary expenditures, we're just going to move to SaaS. I don't want to have to worry about this. Is this a tipping point that you've seen from our enterprise and global customers?
Yep, for some businesses, they're definitely thinking like, hey, those VMware Cloud on AWS folks, they had this whole thing covered, and that's a feather in our cap. We were right on it right away. In fact, a lot of customers thought it was a vulnerability in VMware products, which it was, like we use that piece of software and so it's a vulnerability in our software. But a lot of folks just thought it was us that was affected, VMware products that were affected, because they heard about it from us first. And which is cool, but also, like whatever, it's, but trying to get it out there that we had this patched in our hosted environments, the Workspace ONE hosted environments, the VMware Cloud on AWS, the Carbon Black Cloud, all of that stuff was patched to, like you said, we did emergency patching and took it down, fixed it, and brought it back up again. And so that's a feather in our cap. We got it figured out. And so
that makes me chuckle a little bit, because when I first heard about it, I went, oh, poor guys over in ESX land and Workspace, all the product guys, they're going to be working their Christmases for sure. Felt bad for them.
ESX was
I learned that it was every single SaaS product, and it was everybody's problem, including
Yep. And all the hosted stuff across the internet, all of that stuff everybody uses Log4j,
I'm angry still. I'm still salty at the whole security people, which you're not part of anymore, Bob, but because you moved roles. But when can somebody just fix all this? Like, we got Carbon Black. I've heard about NSX security and doing it at the network layer, and CSX down there at the. I thought that VMware was going to be on top of this, and between Carbon Black and security at the hypervisor level, and just making sure no network craft.
Build a better mousetrap, man. Every time we fix what we've got, and then somebody builds a better mousetrap and gets around it. And so it's an arms race, honestly. So.
Yeah, I can believe that. All right, well, we're running up the top of the hour. I always ask, are you thinking about exploring VMworld in the conference this year? And are you going to be there? Are you going to do any kind of papers? AWS on VMC on AWS? Are you even allowed to go to our conference anymore? Like, I don't know.
Well, I don't know. So with some of the news that's coming out shortly here about VMworld and such. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure. I've got my hotel booked already for the conference, but whether I get to use it or not, or whether I just hang out in the hotel and throw parties or something remains.
I know we're debating on, we traditionally in 2019 and 2018, 2017, we ran a pretty big booth at AWS reInvent as well, where we had VMware Code there. We had a maker spot. We were in the maker area, and we did super cool hacky things with ESX and Raspberry Pis and sensors and that. And we're thinking about going back there again this year in December. Because,
I was going to say that's late in the year, isn't it? December or something.
Yeah. So it's right. They make you go set up over Thanksgiving holiday. Like fantastic. Sign me up. I want to be
People
there. But
with
it's
no
a really
kids is
fun
what
show.
this is. Yeah. So
So maybe we'll get you out there as well.
yeah, that'd be cool. That's a conference that I'd be interested in as well. So
Um,
no, it'll be good to see you folks in person, especially what Corey was mentioning. Give everyone a handshake or a hug or something. So
well, I'm glad you got your hotel booked because San Francisco. You want to do that.
I've learned
that
the hard way
earlier.
is what that is, experience speaking. So.
All right, Matt, any last words?
Bob, if for our listeners that are out there that would like to follow along on your security advice and just your take on all things IT in general, if you have a social media presence, would you mind sharing it? I know you're an active Twitter user out there. How about sharing that for our audience?
Sure. I'm just Plankers on Twitter, and your mileage may vary. That's my personal account, but I generally share what I'm working on and new things. I also publish a lot of stuff at core.vmware.com. If you go there, there's security, ransomware, and compliance pages that might be of interest depending on what you're up to. And and figuring out kind of, how that's going to work. I'm trying to also, I'm thinking about starting up a new, like an office hours, like a public office hours sort of thing for security and compliance as well. I've been called crazy for thinking about doing something like that. And I've also been told that that would be glorious. So trying to figure that one out, but we'll probably do that in probably May at this point or late April or something.
All right, at
We can keep
Plankers, Plankers.
Yep.
Give him a follow. Say hello to Bob if you haven't already. He's been on our show, I think, since 2014 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's been a long time. I used to dial in all the time when it was just call in stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate you being on
very
today.
much.
Hey, thanks
no V barbecue report, so we're going to end it at 1:00. Talk to you later.